All right. Hey, everyone. Coach Reslow here from ResV Systems. Welcome. We're going to do our second interview in our interview series. We are very lucky, and I am very lucky to have Steve England from Hobart and Williams being in on this interview. Steve and I go back a little ways. We're going to talk some volleyball. We're going to talk about, where he came from, all the things he's accomplished, how he views the game. Talk about recruiting as well. So lots of good stuff. But Steve's one of the, in my opinion, one of the top guys in the country. Really lucky to have him. So welcome, Steve. Welcome to ResV.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I really appreciate that intro. I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure, man. I mean, Steve and I, just for everybody, everyone's knowledge, Steve and I go back a couple ways. We used to do some recruiting together, and certainly we would go to nationals and hang out. And I learned a lot from you. So I'm really excited to have you on. And I think the people that watch are going to be really interested on how you view the game, because I think you have a very good perspective on how it works. You're clearly a winner. You've built some programs up, and we'll talk all about it. But again, really excited to have you. So let's talk about the beginning, man. Let's talk about your background. Where'd you come from? Where are you about?
Yeah, so I grew up in Rochester, New York. Really lucky to have live in a state that sponsored high school boys volleyball growing up. I was playing Little League with my friends growing up, and during the summers we had the ride shares, and we would go to Little League practices. And then the winter came along, and some of their older brothers were playing club volleyball, and they're like, "Why don't you play with us?" So at the age of 10, started playing some volleyball for Rochester Pace Bootlegger, local club in the area. And from then on, just fell in love with the game and continued to play, from there. So it's been a great journey to start from 10. Now I'm 40. I've been doing this for 30 years. So it's been fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have that Pace Bootlegger Club, which is high premier. I mean, they've always put out wonderful product and get good coaching over there. And then secondly, it just dawned on me, being in that Rochester, upstate New York area, there's not a lot of sun and fun to play baseball. So you had to get to a court somehow, some way.
No, indoor sport seemed to be the way to go to get your kicks in, for sure.
Dude, I'll never forget going to Nazareth, and we start playing, we walk out, and there's 4 feet of snow on the ground.
Oh, yeah, we'll have snow. We're in that snow belt.
Where did that come from?
I was never a skier.
Yeah.
So playing indoor sport. I did play lacrosse, but that was mostly in the spring.
Sure.
But then volleyball just seemed to stick. But I was a lacrosse and volleyball player in high school. Ironically got recruited a little bit more to play lacrosse. So I played lacrosse in college for 2 years, and then I transferred to Nazareth College, where Cal, who was the club director at Pace, took over as the men's and women's volleyball coach at Nazareth College. And my junior year, they were starting a men's volleyball team. So, we talk about that one conversation that can kind of change your trajectory of life. And that's where volleyball, where I had left it a little bit after high school, came back into my life in college with just a phone call from Cal.
And what position did you play for Cal?
In high school, I was mostly an outside. I graduated before the rally score and the libero was a thing, and then
that's right.
First time playing rally score and libero was in college. So my first year at Naz, I was an outside, and then was a little bit of a utility guy, a little bit of libero. My senior year, serve spec, D spec, that 03. So a little bit of everything.
That's how you learn the game, though. Be involved in all that stuff. So awesome. And how and when your career was over, like, did you know, like, was there a moment that you knew, like, I really want to stay in the business and really coach the game, or what were you thinking?
Yeah, so I was a sociology major, so I really always wanted to know how big groups are organized and were run. But didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with that major. And then after I graduated, Cal asked me to stay on as the assistant men's and women's coach. And then I coached a 13s team for Pace when I was a senior. And then I coached the 15s team for Pace the year after I graduated. And I fell in love with it.
Mm.
You know, that competitive fire in me and being a part of a team. When you leave college and you're not a part of that, that was really hard for me to adjust to.
Uh, uh,
So coaching just kind of fed the fire competitively for me.
yeah, I totally can relate to that in terms of, once your career is over and, it ends fast. It's sort of, people think about it as, oh, well, you have this college career and it goes and this and that, but the door slams shut quickly.
Really
And,
fast.
and you've been built for 4 years to train, be competitive and do all this stuff. And then the door's
Yeah.
closed. And now you're like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And some people find more competitive avenues in their business and their work or whatever they go on
Right.
to. But going to the coaching world, that's I can totally understand that because that
Yeah.
allows you to stay in that mode a little bit. And then if you're any good at it, you really start to thrive and a lot of good things can happen. So
Yeah.
totally relate, really understand that completely. So again, let's talk about your before we go into the college stuff,
Yeah.
as a coach, but some college pivot points for you as a player. Any moments as you in the game that you played that helped direct you where you wanted to go?
Yeah. So I was lucky to have a lot of great coaches in my life. You know, Cal really early on and later in my playing career, and then my high school coach, Mike Fusar at Penfield, seeing a lot of success there. We won his first sectional title. My senior year, lost in the New York State finals. So having those experiences of playing, winning some championships and playing in some high level matches was a great experience for me. And then getting to start a team from scratch as an undergrad at
Mm,
Nazareth was fun, and seeing how that was organized. We just got a bunch of guys together. There was a bunch of guys on the basketball team, right, that weren't seeing some time but had played volleyball in high school. So we're like, well, why don't you come play?
yeah,
You're going to actually start for us because you're 6'5" and 6'7", and have played before, and we needed bodies. So those are guys, and those guys are for the 2 years that I played in volleyball in college. Those are some of the most important people in my life outside my family. The
sure.
relationships that I built on that team. So those were kind of it. Just I loved being a part of a team. I loved the way that volleyball was organized with the traveling, and it's an intellectual sport.
Mm.
And the people are great.
Yeah. No, I tell you, I'm going to relate with you again because as some know, I was a college basketball player mainly,
Mhm.
and then I helped start the first men's volleyball program club for Moravian College when I was there,
Okay.
and I found out early that I like the I like the people better in volleyball than I did in
Yeah.
basketball. Not that there were bad people in basketball, but there was certainly a lot of cutthroat, real hard for things happening in basketball, whereas volleyball, like you said, more intellectual. It's a different sport in terms of who the type of people that gravitate towards it.
Yeah.
And I just found I related to those people better. And at the end of the day, I was like, man, that's definitely what I wanted to be. I tell the story all the time about how, we went to Juniata and beat Juniata in basketball because their basketball team's trash at the time. And then, and no offense to those guys, but
Yeah.
they were struggling and we were pretty good. And, so we got out of there pretty fast and we were waiting for the bus and the men's volleyball team came in and started warming up. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that instead. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I want to do.
Right.
And if you can't change at that moment, but I was able to help with that team and get started. But yeah, I'm with you, man. The people that you meet, the things that you're able to accomplish in volleyball, it just seemed like a better fit for me. And clearly, you had a great experience there as
Yeah.
well. So you get through your playing days. And by the
Yeah.
way, before we start jumping into that, I will note that basketball and volleyball, a lot of the footwork, very, very similar. So
Oh, for sure.
it is one of those things where you can take a basketball guy and turn him into a volleyball guy relatively pain free. Certainly there's the
Yeah.
nuances and all the other things you need to have to be successful at the highest levels. It's going to take some
Right.
time. But you can take a 6'7" middle and 6'7" basketball guy, turn him into a middle pretty
Yeah.
fast
Yeah.
and because the footwork's all the same. It's really
And
nice that way.
a lot of the guys that gravitate from basketball to volleyball don't like banging around in the paint. Those
Right.
tall guys getting pushed around, or just that contact. There's some kids that just don't like that. In volleyball, there's very little contact, but you can still be athletic and hit the ball hard, and that's fun.
Steve, I took a beating in college basketball. I took a beating. You know, at 6'6", 175 when I graduated. Like, I took an absolute beating. And then by my junior year, I was 6'6", about 220, 225, 230, and that was a little bit better. But my first year, dude, you've just said truth.
And there's lots of kids out there that don't want to do that now. Like, that don't like that experience, and it's not for them, but they still want to be competitive. Volleyball is a great sport to come in and be. You can be successful if you're tall. It's a tall man sport. You can be successful pretty fast, and as long as you learn the mechanics along the way, you can have a really good career.
Yeah, absolutely. So the playing career comes to an end, and now we're getting into our college coaching situation. What was your first college coaching experience? And then I know you've been at a couple of schools now, and you've built some winners, certainly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So my first experience was helping out Cal with the women's program the year after I graduated. So I was assistant there and found some success. We were the 4th seed in the Empire 8 tournament, and ended up winning the tournament to get the automatic bid. And then we were in the field of 64 with the automatic bid, but we were the only team with a losing record. So they sent us 499 miles to Calvin to play the #1 seed in the tournament at the time, or at least in that bracket, and just got absolutely smashed. But it was a great experience of, having my first collegiate experience going to the NCAA, and now knowing how hard that is to do, was a special thing, with the whole process of the selection show and then the traveling and seeing how different the practices can be, and then going to play a competition that we don't see in Western New York like we do, from a women's volleyball standpoint in Michigan. A little bit different type of game. So that was great. And then at the same time, I was for 4 years after I graduated, I was just coaching year round. So I was doing the women in the fall, and then boys club started up in November. And then so I did the 15s there, and had some really great talent on that team. Robbie Page, Dan Glamick, some guys that Paul Seida, who set for MIT. So when we won almost every tournament that we entered. So having the talent and looking back at it, knowing that I know nothing about coaching at the time, got really lucky to have all of these great players for me that were winning tournaments. And I'm thinking, I'm really good at this thing. This coaching thing's easy. I can do this. But looking back at it, it was not me. It was the talent that we had on that in that area, and just lucky to have those guys. And they went on to have great collegiate careers. But that's really where that's that winning and that sparked the competitive fire. And so that year really kind of, hey, I want to do this for a living. I can see myself doing this full time. So that's where that came in. And so for 4 years, that's what I was doing, coaching, working a job. I worked at ADT for a little bit. There was a Center for At-Risk Youth that I was doing that allowed me to get, after the job, go coach. So early mornings, get out at like 3:30, and then grab something to eat, and then go coach. So it was really finding a job that could give me some benefits, keep a roof over my head to pay the bills, and then go feed my coaching habit.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the. It's funny you bring that up, because I think about that often. And especially now in my world, where like I'm sort of a coach without a ship in the collegiate world, I'm sort of I'm coming back to the beginning, where I need to find some sort of gig that allows me to coach, because you think about the hours that you need to work to be successful in any occupation. A lot of it does not match up with coaching anything. So that's why you get a lot of teachers, you get a lot of people who are able to be flexible with their work in terms of scheduling, a lot of work from home people, because that allows you to set up the opportunity to be at a practice from 4 to 6 or 5 to 7, or
travel on the weekends, right? Like all the sick days that I took off of work, we're going to volleyball tournaments. We got to leave on a Friday. or take that Monday off.
Yeah.
So you're going to work when you probably shouldn't,
Yeah.
pre-COVID, that was okay.
Yeah.
But you make some, and like we talked to our sports psychologist here, and I framed this story as, yeah, I was making a lot of sacrifices. And he's like, well, what if we looked at that as, instead of a sacrifice, you were making that as an investment? And it's
Yeah.
really true.
Yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
sacrificing; I was investing in that coaching and taking that time on the weekends and traveling, working 7 days a week, was an investment, and really was like the foundation of how I got here.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, sacrifice has such a, I mean, if you understand it from a professional level in terms of, especially in the coaching world, sacrifice doesn't have a negative meaning towards it. You
Right.
understand what it means, but
Yeah.
for a lot, it does have sort of a negative. I have to cut something out, but I love the idea of it's investing in your future and investing in your knowledge of what's going
Yeah.
on and what you
Yeah.
want to do with your life. So awesome.
Yeah.
So we go to Elmira. That's where I met you first. And,
Yeah.
Elmira, I remember playing you, actually I was joking with one of my coaching friends here, Ben, who I interviewed last week, about how like this can easily, quickly become, not an interview series for ResV, but, interviewing coaches that Reslow has a losing record against. Because I remember playing you at Nazareth in the back gym. It was
Yeah.
your own Myra squad versus my Jay Wu squad,
Yeah.
and we had a 5-set thriller, which you got me on. We
Yeah.
pushed you pretty hard, but we couldn't close the deal. But I remember, Myra, talk about that team for you, that college.
Yeah. We missed a step there though, Scott.
Hmm.
I went to Washington, the University of Washington,
Oh yeah,
before Elmira, and I go back to that because it was such a significant piece in my coaching career.
yeah.
You
Let
know,
me know.
so I learned passion for the game in Rochester, playing pace and working with Cal, and really learned from his mentorship how to handle individual personalities. And then went to the University of Washington for my master's degree and had an opportunity to work with Jim McLaughlin and the team that he was coaching there. And just luck plays a lot of roles in being
Sure does.
successful, and
Oh
not
yeah.
really knowing too much about him before I got into that master's program was really set me up for the success and the coach who I am today.
Hmm.
There are a lot of smarter people than you and I, Scott, that think deeply about this game.
Agree.
And I just happen to have been in the gym with some of the smartest and most prolific coaches in the country. Carl McGowan, Jim McLaughlin, Keegan Cook,
Yeah.
at Washington,
Yeah.
and seeing what a Pac-12 operation was run from the behind the scenes. I lived with Jim for that season. I
Wow.
moved out to Seattle. I sold all of my physical possessions. I just grabbed whatever clothes on my back and did this master's program. And I subletted a room in Seattle for the summer, and thinking I was going to be able to find a different place to play or
Yeah.
to live during the women's volleyball season, and that wasn't true. um, uh, Apparently doing your master's and working for a Pac-12 women's volleyball program seems to take up a lot of your time.
Sure does, I bet.
And Jim wasn't willing to let me leave or miss practice to go find a place. So he's like, "You're just going to live in my basement for this
Wow.
for the year." So I would get up with him in the morning, go into the office with him for the day, do our thing till evening, come back with him to his house, and then did that for that entire season. So not only
Holy
did I get to
smokes.
see how he coached and how he did his thing in the gym and how he taught, I also got to see his personal life, which was the most unique experience I think I've ever had in terms of coaching world, because I got to see how he interacted with his family.
Yeah.
Right? I got to meet and talk to his wife and form a relationship with his kids.
Yeah.
And then I'm in the basement doing some grad work, staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning, getting up at 5 to go do it all over again. So
Wow.
That was really a special opportunity that really helped me shape, you know, who I am as a head coach for men's at this next level.
Sure, sure. I totally apologize. I forgot all about
Oh
that
yeah.
experience for you. And working with Jim McLaughlin. I mean, that's the name I know the best. The other
Mhm.
guys I know of. But that's fantastic. And what was the biggest? I mean, if you don't mind breaking away a little bit, what was the
Yeah.
biggest thing you took away from the way he handled his program versus, some of the other things that we do?
Yeah. So I think when you're at that level, you have the resources, um, from the volumetrics to the volley station. At that point, it was
Yeah,
data
yeah,
volley. The level of organization and routine that you have to have. I mean, though you're competing for a national title, it's close to professional volleyball as you possibly can get in this country at the
yeah,
highest level
yeah.
is Division I women's. Um, and so how organized and routine based he was. I mean, he did the same thing at the same time every day.
No kidding. Wow.
Um, so they were regimented in the routines, and even when they would travel, it's the same. We'd leave at the same time. Um, they're they're doing a serve receive practice. They watch film. They go eat. They go back to the gym. Right, everything was structured and organized,
Clockwork.
and
Yeah.
keeping those student athletes, focused on the task at hand. So that
Hmm.
was probably the biggest difference between being a Division III student athlete to the Pac-12,
Hmm.
just in the resources they have available to them, and then how regimented their routines are, when they're in season and out of season, but mostly in.
Wow. That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah,
So let's move to Elmira.
yeah,
So tell me about all that experience.
yeah. So Elmira had a job open up after I graduated from Washington. I interviewed and they made me an offer. I was coming back home, moving back from Seattle to come back to the East Coast was a little bit closer to home for me. So that was the draw. And then the opportunity at 28 years old to be a head coach
Mm.
of a men's program. There was, I think at the time I wrote on my whiteboard in my office that there was 90, I'm one of 99. At
Mm.
that time, there's only 99 men's volleyball programs in the
That's right.
country, and it's grown exponentially since then. But I always wanted to remind myself of how lucky I was to be a men's volleyball coach in this country.
Yeah, I
Um,
learned that the hard way.
right? Yeah,
When
yeah,
JWU
it's
went under, I was like, oh man, there'll be other opportunities. And then you realize that, there's not that many out there.
right.
And, a buddy of mine, Steve, he not involved in athletics. He's just a friend from around this area. And, he heard me quasi complaining about the situation. He said, listen,
Yeah,
dude, like most everybody has to change jobs about 5 or 6 times in their career. You got to do your dream job for 12 years. You can shut up.
right.
And I was like, I was like, yeah,
That's a fair perspective,
yeah. And
and
I was
good
like,
for him
you're
for
right,
putting you in
dude.
your place.
Yeah. Well,
But it's
he,
hard. It's hard.
yeah,
There are things and you have a family, and that
yeah.
Ruby and I are trying to start our own family, but it was a little bit easier to move from place to place,
Mm,
without you have kids and
that's
changes your
right.
life a little bit. So
Yeah.
um, we've been lucky to have the opportunity, and Ruby's been great. And without her, I don't think I would have been able to do what I do as
Yeah.
well.
It takes a very good partner, someone who understands completely the amount of time,
Yeah,
effort, mental capacity it takes up. Like,
right,
one of the biggest complaints that my wife had, and rightfully so, is that, and I'm still not great at it. It's taken me a long time to get good at it. Is that, being present when you're there at home with the kids, because
right.
you'll be thinking about the game, you'll
Oh
be
yeah,
thinking about your roster, you'll be thinking about what needs to happen next, you'll be thinking about the scouting report,
yep,
you'll be thinking about recruiting, you'll be thinking about all sorts of things. And next thing you know, you've been sitting in that chair in your house in front of your family for 15 minutes and have blank stare on your face. And,
yeah,
like, you can't do that to your family. Those people are supporting you, and those people are the most important parts of your life. So, there's truth to coaches widows. There's truth
yeah,
to the idea that, my wife also used to talk about how, my mistress is volleyball, because like
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
focus on, more often than not. So yeah, having a great spouse, great partner, somebody who understands and can knock you out of it when you need to be knocked out of it,
Absolutely.
because you
Yeah.
will fall into that hole and you'll be thinking, you'll spend, and I know we've done it, 12 hours a day thinking about the
Yeah.
game and what you need to do next to be competitive to win the next
Yeah.
match, which is
You
wild.
don't turn it off. It doesn't
Yep.
turn off. That's for sure.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So
And then,
yeah, go ahead.
so do you want, what do you want to know about Elmira? The time there?
Well, I'm interested because Elmira was because that's when I first met you, and
Yeah.
and that's when we started really, we weren't, we were friendly obviously because we're
Yeah.
decent people, but we didn't become, friends until later on. But that I'll never forget that Elmira match. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
know it might be more important to me than to you, but, well, that was a big match for us at Johnson and Wales, because that again was another step where we were playing a very good team and we were
Yeah.
in the mix, because my goals at the beginning of Johnson and Wales was to be in the mix. Like
Yeah.
I had no, I'm very proud of this fact. I had no aspirations that we were winning anything yet. We had to just be
Okay.
competitive first and
Yeah.
then look the part. And that Elmira match was big. And I remember
Yeah.
going, all right, well, we almost got, Coach England. I don't know who Coach England is, but we almost got him. And,
Yeah.
and then later on, we reconnect when you're at St. John Fisher and you're building
Yeah.
that program into the monster that it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Elmira was great. And I've learned so much from that experience. And I was lucky. We talked about it pre-interview about taking a team over from somebody else. So
Yeah.
I started as the head coach there in the year 3 of that program's existence. And so the coach before it did a fantastic job of building that program and bringing in some talent, in that freshman class that I came in and started with was phenomenal.
Mm.
Some Rochester guys. We had Michael Valutato, who's leads some stat categories in assists and all of Division III. So I was gifted this team of a lot of talent, and some depth, and there was some cultural things that we needed to iron out, that was there before I got there. So that took the first year of kind of just, hey, this is how I'm going to run the ship. This is how we're going to do things. But then I learned really quick how hard recruiting was. We brought in one guy my first year. And so that's not enough to sustain a program. We were lucky
Yep.
that we weren't graduating anybody because we were still in year 3. So I was lucky to not get really snake bitten by just having that one recruit come in. So that's where I learned how important it is, not only just the volleyball and getting the culture piece, but the recruiting needs to be just as important from there. So those are the 2 biggest things that I really learned, was like how important recruiting is, and then also the culture piece and making sure that everybody's pulling the rope in the same direction.
Those are the big, in my opinion, those are the big 3, right? You have to recruit, you have to have the horses, you have to have the culture piece set, and you have to know your volleyball. So those are the big 3 in any program. And certainly, that Elmira team was tough. I remember not liking that. I remember not liking where we were in that match from time to time, but yeah, you did a nice job there. And then there was the opportunity at St. John Fisher, and that was brand new, right?
Yeah. So, Ruby, I met Ruby when I was at Fisher, or not at Fisher, at Elmira. And we knew that, Elmira might not be where we wanted to, raise a family, buy a house. So, there were rumors that Fisher was going to start a men's volleyball program. That is actually getting a lot closer to home for me. So I reached out to the women's volleyball coach, and we just kind of broached the subject, and we had talked about it, and she ended up writing the white paper to help start that program. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to help them start their program 6 years ago. And so that was another opportunity to help start a new program, but for the first time ever doing it by myself.
Yeah.
And you're never doing it by myself, but like doing it literally from scratch.
Yeah.
So we, got 9 guys that first year, and then the rest of that 21 on that roster were guys that were either in grad school or already on campus. And we were just looking for bodies, and then, it was a slow progression off of that, but it was a great institution. I could win that recruiting corridor of Buffalo to Albany or to Long Island. It was a really great getting New York State high school boys volleyball, like good volleyball players from.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good programs in the club circuit, certainly in New York. I mean, we mentioned Pace Bootleggers, which you were a part of, but you can go into that Long Island area and, LIVBC, certainly ACAD's come into the play. And then there's some other great ones as well. Syracuse was more in your area as well. There's a lot of good club and a lot of good talent out there. And again, I'm this year's old where I just figured out that, hey, you guys are really good because there's snow everywhere and there's no outdoor sports. It's, unless you're in the summer, but yeah, there's a lot of great places to recruit, to really bring in talent if you can do it. And you mentioned that, it was a slow progress, dude. You took St. John Fisher to a UVC championship in 5 years. That's ridiculous. Like, that's not slow. That's light speed.
I appreciate it. It felt a lot slower than when you're in the mix. It feels like you want to be faster, but you're right. It was but it was a tribute to the guys, and they picked it up, and they were talented, and they wanted to win. And playing in the UVC will do that as well. Playing the best teams in the country elevates your game. You're not gonna learn a lot of volleyball and how to win at a high level by playing sub 500 teams. So
right. For those that don't know, in terms of Division III volleyball, and I can do a whole video on Division III volleyball versus D1, D2, and how it's a lot similar and a lot similar in level than you think. I mean, D3 volleyball is very, very good, and oftentimes can beat some D1, D2 schools and some NAIA schools. So I can go. That's a whole different ballgame. But just to let you know, the UVC is arguably the top conference in the country. I mean, I don't think there's many that can talk about from soup to nuts, start to finish, how many teams are nationally competitive and nationally ranked. So to win the UVC, that's a huge accomplishment. I'll never forget, we were we brought Jay Wu. Jay Wu used to go down to Nazareth all the time because first off, I loved Cal. I mean, I was a big fan of his right away. And he used to tell me all the time, we love JWU the best because they're the only GNAC team that'll come visit. And it was my mentality was we got to play the best teams. Like we can't, like you said, Steve, we can't be playing teams that aren't above 500 and being able to achieve what we wanted to achieve. So we would go to Nazareth every year. And one time we were, it might have been the same year that we pushed you to 5. I can't recall, but there was one time where we were pretty decent, and Cal was just like, "Listen, go win that GNAC. Might as well go win it because they only have 2 teams you have to get through." And I was like, "Well, it's kind of tough. Those 2 teams are nationally ranked." He's like, "Shut up." He's like, "The UVC is an absolute nightmare. Like it is. All of them are nationally ranked. The top 7 teams out of it, and." You guys got nothing. Just go win it. I was like, I wish it was that simple, Cal. I would have done it already. But he was absolutely right. So for you to win the UVC, man, like that's a huge accomplishment. Like I said, in 5 years, forget it. That's outstanding. So really, I always thought that was amazing. When you won it, I was so happy for you. I was like, oh my God, look at this. This is wonderful.
I appreciate it. It was a special moment for sure.
Yeah. And now, you're going to start over again. And when you told me the news, I was smiling ear to ear because I was like, well, Hobart, that's fantastic. Number one, because it seems like you got, more support. Not that Fisher didn't support you, but there's more resources and more support there. Maybe more than Fisher could possibly offer. I don't know. But the other part is if you want to start a program, you start with Steve England. That's the guy.
I guess I walked into an expertise I was unaware of, unintentionally moving towards. Yeah, it's Hobart is fantastic. Academic institution that has a national brand, an athletic department that we're coming off of a ice hockey national championship this past weekend.
Yeah.
A storied history of national championship winning programs. A college that is aligned to support athletics. The resources that we have, we're really setting the bar for Division III men's volleyball with starting this program, and it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. Even that team at Fisher, I love those guys, and it was probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my career is leave a nationally ranked program just coming off of a UVC championship and an NCAA appearance for the first time as a coach. But when somebody makes you an offer you can't refuse, and you bring that home to the wife, life is tough, and it's hard to make those tough choices, but you have to do what's best for you and your family, and really excited about what we have going here at Hobart.
Yeah, it's again, they couldn't pick a better guy, because I mean, you've taken that St. John Fisher job. I mean, really, I thought you performed miracles over there, and I do feel pretty fortunate that my one win against you was a pretty big one in California, so I was pretty stoked about that.
Huge.
Yeah, that was a big one. That was one I hang my hat on.
Well, you should. I mean, that you had some dogs, man. You had some pretty big athletic guys that we just couldn't handle. And sometimes it doesn't matter what style or how smart I am as a volleyball coach. If you just have playing a team that is more athletic than you, you're gonna lose this game.
Dude, Steve, we threw the kitchen sink at you. Like it took everything we had to get the W, and then we were spent, and then we played the banana slugs, and they told us what was what.
Oh my God, that tournament is so hard. There's no bad teams when you go out to California. And like, we can get away with playing 3-4 matches in a short period of time here on the East Coast, because you can mix in some teams that you can put your backups in. You need to play your starters in every single match out there, and it is a grind. And you have to travel across the country. That's not easy either. And if you can win away in California against those teams, then you can come back to the East Coast and play with anybody.
Yeah, and that was the plan, and we had that was probably ultimately our best year. I remember that 2019 team fondly.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So as we go into the second part, we've already been talking for a long time, but off camera, we were talking about how I could talk to Steve forever. But the second part, I want to talk a little bit about, your volleyball coaching style. But before we sort of jump into that, a couple of things that I asked Ben that I want to ask you. The first one is the craziest 3 situations you found yourself in as a college coach.
Yeah. So I think it has a lot to do with like stressful situations. And I couldn't really think of 3 of the craziest. I could think of 2. The first one was our first year at Fisher. And we went to Hiram, one of our early weekends in January. And we get into a 5th set match against Penn State Barron, who Phil does a fantastic job running both those programs there. Have so much respect for him. And I wrote the lineup wrong in the 5th set. Right. And it was just like, we're trying to turn the dial a little bit. We're trying to get our matchups. And then I end up writing the lineup incorrectly and submit it. And then when they're on the court and the down ref is fixing your guys, and you're like, oh, I messed up.
Oh,
right. And so, then it was like a collective, the guys don't know where they're supposed to be. Kelly and I are trying to get everybody, and we ended up pulling that match out. But I think more of it was because we were just worried about not being out of rotation, and that stress of a 5th set match didn't really kind of kick into it. We were more worried. We were just in the moment. What do we need to do right now?
That's right. Yeah.
So obviously learning. And then it was funny on the way home, Kelly, I think I still might have it at home. She has, like, in case of emergencies, this envelope. She wrote the rotations of it flipping your outsides and your middles. So I have in case of emergency lineup, what the rotations are supposed to be like
Oh,
if
that's
you write a
awesome.
rotation
Oh,
in
dude.
wrong in the fifth set.
That's how I ended my career. Like
Oh, really?
my last day, we're at Wentworth for a tri match, and we're playing LaSalle and Wentworth, and it's a big match. Like,
Yeah,
nobody knew that COVID was going to eliminate the rest of the season. So,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
a giant match, and we have to beat LaSalle, and we want to see if we can sting Wentworth, but probably
yeah,
not. But we play LaSalle, and we play poorly. We should beat
yeah,
LaSalle in three at that that year, and instead it's a 5 set grinder,
yeah.
and the same situation. We go into the fifth set. I'm thinking, all right, I need a better matchup here. I'll spin the dial a little bit, and I
Yep,
put in the wrong lineup,
yep,
and I basically flipped my middle and my right side,
yeah,
and it turned into a nightmare. We lost 15-13, and we lost the match, but 15-13, and the 2 points that are the difference are 2 out of rotation calls.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and of course, unlike, I mean, I love my assistant coach Brian Garapi, but boy did he melt away from the situation. I don't remember seeing him
Oh,
the
really?
entire time. Like, I was like, dude,
Yeah,
what? And so I was on an island, and I was just I
yeah,
was pushing pieces together as it was happening.
right.
And of course we lose, and I'm sort of shell shocked, and I kind of pull it together. We still got to play Wentworth.
Yeah, yeah,
And so we compete, but Wentworth's just better, and we lose. And I remember walking out the gym, and like Evan is like, dude, I just want to give you a hug. And I was like, it's okay. I mean, nobody knew that was going to be my last
yeah,
coaching
right.
experience at the college level, but I mean, that's how it ended. And it's like, oh,
Yeah. Well,
geez.
and he's giving you a hug because we've all been there.
Yeah,
We've all
yep,
put in a lineup wrong,
yep,
and it's a moment where you're like, I've hurt the team.
yep,
I
yes,
this is if we lose, I got to officially take the brunt of all of this
yep,
because it's not their fault. I was the one that was supposed to make sure the lineup was right, but
yeah,
I've learned now to have my assistant coach check the lineup before I hand it in now. So it's like you learn from
yeah,
those devastating
yeah.
mistakes.
Well, I used to think about it. I mean, I used to talk about it a lot where it was like, how many lineups have I put in my career? Like
Right,
thousands of
right,
thousands. And I've
yeah,
never had that happen,
yeah,
but that was the day.
yeah.
That was the day it was going to happen. But yeah, so I totally relate there. Yeah, those are two wonderful, crazy situations.
Hmm.
I think the only
Hmm.
one that I can compete with is that I was coaching a women's team one time, Johnson and Wales 2011, and we were in a match at LaSalle. So apparently LaSalle is just the
Yeah.
bane of my existence. And I think we lose in 4, but we're competitive. But we were in rebuilding mode.
Yeah.
But one of my middles, we're on the floor, we're getting ready to go. My middle turns around and looks at the server. In that exact
Hmm.
moment, we hear a massive sound, like a pop, and then we realize that the net top cable snapped.
Oh, what?
Yeah, because you know how much torque they put on that
Oh, yeah.
on the top tape. Oh my gosh, I thought I was just praying she didn't get hurt. Like, I was like, oh my
Right.
god, like, are you all
Yeah.
right? Are you
Yeah.
okay? But she didn't even recognize it. Like, she was just looking at something completely different. Heard the snap, did one of these guys,
Yeah.
and then I mean, and it took
It's
forever to.
dangerous. I've
Oh, dude,
never seen that happen before.
yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Absolutely
To
wild.
have one of those things actually snap on you
Oh,
is
dude.
had to be super scary.
It was, and we were sort of uneasy for the rest of the match, and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not saying that affected it. They were better than us, but it was pretty wild.
Yeah.
It's just a strange moment in time. All right, so talk to me about your biggest win and your worst loss. I mean, we sort of edged
Yeah.
into that. So
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the biggest win in my coaching career at the college level has to be our win against New Paltz in the UVC championship last year with
sure,
Fisher. It's something that you talk about when you start a program of winning the UVC and going to the NCAA tournament, and to actually have that come to fruition. And with 2 of the guys that started that program with me, I had
yeah,
2 fifth-year seniors with Paul Hackford and David Surqua, and those guys had invested so much time into
yeah,
that program and had seen every single point that we had played and that journey for them to get to a championship and go to the NCAA. I was so thrilled for those guys to experience that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And how about the toughest defeat?
Yeah, toughest defeat would have to be when I was at Elmira and we were having that really good year, my second year. We were 7th in the country. Back when the UVC played both their quarters and their semifinals in the same day. So
Yeah.
Nazareth was hosting. NYU had upset Nazareth in the quarters. We had played Medaille in 1-5 in that Aux gym, and then right away had to play NYU in the semifinals of the UVC, and ended up losing in 5. And I thought on a regular day we matched up really well with NYU, but by the 5th set, my 2 outsides had no gas. There was nothing left in the tank. And I truly believe if we could have made it to the finals of the UVC that year, that we would have been in the tournament with an at-large bid. So, that was probably the toughest one looking back at losing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny how that happens too. Like, in our sport, not many other teams, well, let's talk about other sports, not many other sports where you're playing back-to-back opponents. Like it doesn't happen very often, but certainly never heard of it in football or basketball, or maybe baseball. You can do it because you play doubleheaders, but that's a little bit less physical activity. I mean, there's physicality. I don't want to jump into the baseball world, but
don't do it.
But in terms of like the the type of sport that we have, which is both mentally stressful and physically stressful. We're one of the few sports I can think of that plays back-to-back matches. You can play and it becomes not only mental, but how much physicality you have left after you've played, 400 points of volleyball or whatever it is.
10 sets and back-to-back with a few snacks involved. We didn't eat a meal between those matches, right? We barely took a warm-up. So I think that's part of the reason why we chose in the UVC as coaches to go to a 3-day format. Just have the 6 teams in there, 1 and 2 get by, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5 on Friday, and then semifinals, finals. And that's just more conducive to the student athlete experience, to their health and well-being, to the coach's mental health and well-being. And you can actually prepare for something that could determine you getting in or out of the NCAA tournament. That's a big deal.
True. It's true. All right. So real open-ended question, Steve. What's your brand of volleyball, man?
Yeah. So I think I want things to be as simple as possible. Simple is better than complex is something that GMS, Gold Medal Squared, is a program that I follow. And that's their overriding principle of what they teach and from a motor learning standpoint. So if we can do simple things for long periods of time, it becomes easily repeatable. So I'll break it down kind of offensively. We want to play simple and fast. We want to play as fast as we can to the pins. So my opponents have to make a decision. Do you double my pins or you double my middle, but you can't do both?
Right. Yeah.
So we want to stretch out and put a lot of pressure on that middle blocker. And then defensively, we are going to make our opponents hit great shots to beat us. So we want to have a good game plan. We have our default defense that we play. I like a bunch read and a middle defense. So we want to touch and dig a lot of balls. If we get blocks, that ends up becoming a bonus because we know that blocking isn't that statistic that determines the outcome of the game, but you can frustrate hitters a lot if we can slow them down. So we read block, if that, the principle of blocking is we want to take away the attack where the set takes the hitter. So if that set takes the hitter to the pin, we're going to take away line. If that set takes them inside, they're going to hit cross court. So we're going to take cross court. So we're going to take away the tendency of the game and make hitters hit great shots to beat us from a defensive standpoint. And then at the end of the day, every coach at this level wants to win the serve and pass.
Yeah.
Right? We spend but we dedicate just practices to serve and pass. A lot of morning sessions where we break up the group into two small groups and 45-minute blocks of just serving and passing, and then some film session, and then some 6-on-6. But we value those two skills more than any other thing that we do.
I like it. Especially like, the idea of the slowdown at the block. Like, that's one of the things that I preach a ton. I talk about it a little bit differently, whereas, and I probably need to correct my my verbiage a little bit, because I talk about how, digging, in my opinion, is such a limited skill in the men's volleyball game. And what I mean by that, and oftentimes I'm a little bit off, I suppose, but what I mean by that is that if our block isn't solid and someone's thumping a ball, we're not digging that ball. Like, because what ends up happening on my gym a lot, and you can talk to your point as well, is that my libero or my middle back outside hitter, or even my setter or oppo in the right back, they'll dive into the center because someone's going to snap a ball. Like, that's not, that dig doesn't matter that much to me, because certainly if you make it, that's great. But if you diving into the center of the court, because, and then on a misread, you're always creeping in because you want that, but then our block slows something down, or there's a cross court shot that's right in your lap, but because you're sunk in so far, you can't make the easy play. Then the block matters more. But I think you verbalized it differently and better than the way I describe it, which is, hey, I'm not worried about digging, I'm worried about the block. But you're talking about how the dig matters, but the block is the slowdown that causes the dig.
Yeah, and we're playing, in the UVC, we're playing a lot of great attackers that have lots of different range. And when we dive deep into the scout, we'll take certain things away from certain people. But we have our specific default that we do. This is Hobart volleyball. This is how we're gonna play the game, and then we can tweak and make adjustments in game based on what we're seeing. Right. But they know when they go, my teams know this is how we're going to play our brand of volleyball before we go to the matches. And then, it's up to you as the coach on educating how we make some certain tweaks. But we're going to know some fundamental and some tactical, how we're going to defend certain teams.
Awesome. So the next question I have, and I have it written down here, is, what's one thing that you think every coach should know that they probably don't know? And then from there, we'll have how do you handle personalities of athletes and officials?
Right. So one thing, I think that if you've never been a head coach before, nothing that you do in your life can really prepare you for that. And you just have to do an experience and be willing to fail. And be open and honest with your players. I come from a belief that we need to be servant leaders as coaches. That my career as a volleyball player is over, and it's my job to transfer my knowledge of the sport onto my student athletes, and it's about them and their experience. And I wish I knew about the game when I was their age, right? I probably would have been a little bit better. But you're going to come into situations, and like you kind of hit about it. You think about it all the time. And in different situations that come up, and you have to find the appropriate way to handle them. And one thing I remember driving home with Jim, and he told me, do you know why coaching is hard? And I said, no. And he said, because human emotions are unpredictable. And that's why this profession is hard. So we have to be really good human beings. And we have to model that. And we have to hold our student athletes accountable for being good people. And they're going to mess up. And we have to address it, and each situation is different, but that is, in a nutshell, it is why this is a unique profession.
Yeah. And you brought up something that got me thinking. One of the questions that I'm sort of going to use in my interview series for everybody is that
Mhm.
question, what what is one thing you think a coach should know that he doesn't, or she might not know?
Yeah,
But I should probably add another one, which is, what do you think, is one thing that a player should know that they probably don't know? And my first thing would be, just my, as it came to me right now, is you understand how much your coach cares and how much time he or she is
yeah,
putting into this. Like, they're
yeah,
putting in so much time, more than you could probably understand, and they
yeah,
care more about it than you probably do.
yeah,
So, these moments that happen where, just like Jim said, emotions are unpredictable, where they get upset or frustrated and angry, and they can be angry with you even as the
yeah,
head coach. And oftentimes it is you that they're angry
yeah,
with, you know, but they're thinking sort of selfishly about, selfish is a harsh word too, but they are thinking centric about what they need
oh,
and want.
absolutely,
And oftentimes they don't recognize that, I used to talk about it a lot, where, hey, I'm going to make decisions what's best for the team, not necessarily what's best for you. And
yeah,
it's not because I don't like you. It has nothing to do with personality. It's like, it's about what's going to make this team be the most successful. And then I
right,
will come to you and try to do good things to help you achieve your potential and keep growing. But a lot
yeah,
of times you might not like the decisions. So
right, yeah. And I think and we got to talk about it as coaches. We can't just expect these 18 to 22-year-old young men or women to understand that when they come
right.
here. We
Yeah.
have to teach them about those things. And and if you can get the right amount of group, the right kids and young men and women, right, on the bus, that's when it becomes special. Is
Yeah.
when you have everybody understanding that this isn't about one individual person. This is about the success of the group.
Yeah.
Um, that's when that culture piece really starts to kick in.
Agree. So what are some tips and tricks that you use to handle personalities?
Yeah, I think the personalities and the officials, I think, kind of play both hand in hand. Yeah, I'm all about building positive relationships with people that are involved with every aspect of my programs. From the parent to our AD to our athletic training staff to our um, the doctors that work with our student athletes to our opposing you know players and coaches, opposing administrative staff, right? I'm in the boat of, we want to make sure that everybody is going to be a fan of Hobart volleyball,
Right.
right? And from a student athlete perspective, you hit it. We care, and our student athletes have to know we care about them first as people and what they want to be, and help them become what they want to become in life. And I'm here to do that. I'm here to support that for
Yeah.
them. And that's where we can even get to the volleyball, that's where it starts, is them knowing that I care for them as more of as a person than I am as a volleyball player.
Sure.
Um, and then when it comes to the official part of things, we're at a point in our post-COVID where we're struggling for officials. Um, and so yeah, they might make a call. They're human. They make mistakes as well, and it might hurt my team in that moment. But trying to stay composed and knowing that if I lose it on a ref, then that gives permission for my teams to lose it, and then we lose our composure. I try to handle things as calm and collected as I possibly can. And early on in my career, you'd be like, you saw me coach, you'd be like, that's not Steve England. He's not that guy. But it's something that I had to work on. And
Oh yeah.
and again, it comes down to respecting people as humans. And that there's more important things in the game of volleyball, even though we think it is in that moment. But we need more people. We need more people to volunteer their time to be officials, because it's not a full-time gig at Division III. These guys have full-time jobs and are doing this out of the passion for the game. And there's not very many new kids or young people wanting to do that job. So we have to
Yeah.
take care of them.
Yeah, I've jumped into the officiating pool.
Awesome,
So, so
fantastic,
I do high school stuff, and I'm a Lions person for the NCAA,
awesome.
and like, it's fun, it's cool. But what's interesting is that, you start to learn that a lot of these guys and gals that are in the officiating world, they're on the older side, number one.
Yeah,
So there aren't a
absolutely.
lot of new blood that's coming in. And then number two, they're utilized everywhere. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, this might be their fifth or sixth match of the week,
Right.
and that's hard. Like, it really is hard. If you've done, um, if you think about coaching, coaching a match and how much it takes into it, imagine seeing, 7 matches in a week,
Right.
and you're the decision maker on everything that's happening. Like,
Right.
it's very challenging. And then you might have, let's say, 3 or 4 high school matches, 2 college matches, and then on the weekends you go to a
A
club thing,
club
and
event. Yeah.
you're there for 2 days, and you see 17 matches or whatever it
Right.
is. Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot of
And then you're
information.
going a full-time
Yeah.
job on top of that,
That's right. That's right.
you
So,
know?
the officials, I mean, officials can be frustrating. Totally get it.
Yeah.
But, if you can sort of understand where they're coming from a little bit and not, you know, there's certainly times to be frustrated and to voice your opinion as a coach. I mean, I've done it.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly when we were younger, we were a little bit more hot headed, but
Yeah,
there are
absolutely.
times you need to be able to be like, dude, I can't let you do that to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all about asking the right question at the right time,
Right. Right.
right? I think knowing, I've had the luck, I've never really studied the rule book, right? But you just know certain things over the course of a career and doing it, being a part of the game for 30 years. I've seen almost everything.
Right. Right.
And I'm sure I'm going to see new things come up every year that I don't know about. But I learned the tricks of the trade of asking the right question at the
Sure.
right time and when to protest the match and when not to protest the match. And it's all about knowing the game and then asking the right questions to that down official to get what you're going
And
after.
a little bit of humor helps too.
Yeah. Oh,
Be
yes.
personable and be fun. Like,
Yes.
this year there was a match that we were in that was pretty tough for my club 18s team, and their setter was holding on to that ball a lot, and
Yeah.
really holding on to it good. And then sometimes it was coming out funky too, and I of course I'm starting to complain a little bit, like, hey, you can't do that. It's interesting because you don't want you don't want to talk smack about a kid, but like at the
No.
same time, like, hey, like, he's not allowed to do that. So,
Right.
I'm making and finally the down official goes, Res, listen, it's up to it's up to his opinion. And then
Yeah.
we haven't broken the band of the next of the problem yet. Like, we haven't gotten further enough for him to make the call. And I said,
Yeah.
well, when's that going to happen? Because we're real. This is really amazing. This lasted this long. And then
Yeah.
finally he makes a call later on. We call it, then there's a timeout called. And the down official looks at me and I goes, hey, we broke the mark. Like, we're not allowed to
Right.
call,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and he's chuckling. And again, instead of being a jerk in that moment and really being, angry, I made it into sort of a fun, like,
Yeah.
hey, we finally got through, right? And, and
Right.
and and now the guy's not angry with me. He's not annoyed with me.
Yes.
He's not feeling, cold from me. He's feeling, oh, look,
Yeah.
guy knows what he's doing. He just wants that particular call, and he knows
Right.
it's subjective, and it just is what it is.
Yeah. And again, you're treating people like you want to be treated.
Exactly.
It's a big deal.
Exactly. All right. So we're rounding third, heading home here, Steve, and I thank you
Okay.
for all your time, man. I know you're
Absolutely.
a busy man. Let's talk about the recruiting process for you. So you're
Okay.
building a new roster,
Yeah.
and how's that all going?
It's going fantastic. So we have 12 to 13 guys on the roster right now. We're still waiting on a couple absolutes, those deposits to roll in.
Sure.
And it's been a journey, learning a new institution and what we're really good at from an academic standpoint, what we have to offer, was something that you got to learn. You got to learn how to sell the product. We're really salesmen when
Yeah,
we're
sure.
talking about recruiting. So, I had to learn what Hobart William Smith was about from an academic standpoint. What would we have to offer in terms of career services? What are the majors that we offer that are really popular? So that's kind of a little bit of a learning curve. And then going to a higher academic school than where I was at previous institutions has been a challenge as well in learning the type of student athlete that would be interested in coming to Hobart William Smith. So it's been fun. It's been a fun adventure. I'm a little less stressed now than I was probably in December.
Sure.
Because this team, I can see the names on my board move from the left side to the right side onto the
Isn't it
roster.
wonderful when that happens? Oh
Oh
my
my
God.
goodness. Talk about bringing it home with you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So where do you find your players? I mean, I think that's one of the things that, coaches certainly, we talk a lot about the coaching
yeah,
and I'm hoping that coaches will watch this interview, but kids might watch it too,
yeah,
players. So
yeah,
like, where do you find your kids? How do you find your kids? And what are you looking for when you're trying to find
right.
them?
So I think it changes from institution to institution. For me as a personal coach, right? There's a certain demographic of student athlete that went to Elmira, then there was that went to Fisher, that goes to Hobart, right? And so I think the challenge for me is learning what type of student do we typically have on campus. We're right now currently at Hobart, we have guys on our roster of incoming class from all over the country. So we have a freshman on campus already that's played libero growing up in the country of Chile. We have a student athlete from Ukraine who's already been on campus. We have an incoming freshman from California, from Chicago, from Boston, Florida, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. So I think our team really identifies more what the overall institution is. Higher academic, we market ourselves as a mini Ivy League school. So if you can't get into your Harvards, your Princetons, your NYUs, those type of schools, we're a great option. We still want a high academic experience, but we might have a little bit lower academic standards. Getting into MIT, and there's people that get 1600 perfect score and are valedictorian of their class. They don't get into MIT. That's somebody that we would take a look at, right?
Well, I mean, when I was working at NCSA, that was one of the things I found really interesting, which was, there was plenty of people that wanted to go to MIT, Harvard, Princeton.
Yeah,
Those are the big three. And every time I would send profiles to those coaches who, I have good relationships with all three of them, I believe now. They would say, it's great, we'd love to have them, but can they get in? Like, that's the only thing they think about is, if you actually get into the school, you're on the team, like it's over. Like,
absolutely.
we'd love to have you, but it's just,
Right.
can you get through the academic door to be involved? And certainly, Hobart is right on the cusp, but they're not Ivy League, but they're very close. And certainly, I don't know if they'd ever want to join the Ivies, but it's certainly a very good school that, if MIT is not going to work out, or Princeton or Harvard, your next tier where you're still getting a high academic situation, Hobart's got to be on that list.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're in our alumni base, we're an institution that just had their bicentennial, so we've been around for 200 years.
Wow.
Our alumni base is huge. We raised $1 million in our athletic day of donors in February.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good.
So we have alumni that care about the school and are willing to give back, and want to see athletics be successful. And I think that this is the reason why I chose to come here, is because I can see long-term success for a period of time, and having the bells and whistles and the athletic support from the institution and our professors to our administration is unmatched.
Yeah. And in terms of finding kids, like, you're doing the standard, you're going to club tournaments, you're using, services like NCSA, and then also, there's a statistical type of kid you're looking for, right? Someone who's, athletic touches around 10,
Right.
10-9, right? Like,
Yeah, well, I'm not big on, how high you touch. I don't think how high you touch equates to how good of a volleyball player you are, right? Yeah, that's a great metric. If you can do that, fantastic. But if you can't pass or serve a ball, or put a ball away, I want to recruit guys that are, have some feel for volleyball IQ. But yes, I will go to club tournaments. We use websites like NCSA or Field Level. University Athlete, I would highly suggest everybody to look into. You can create your own free profile and put your videos on that. And that's every coach in the country from a volleyball standpoint has that. That's what we use to track kids and track our recruits when we go to Orlando for AAUs or Salt Lake City for USAB. That app has a free option for student athletes. And then networking, right? Like club directors that I formed relationships with, high school coaches. Mike Fusar has been great at Penfield, and John Collette at Shen. Those guys are local guys that I talk to on a regular basis. And then I have Kevin Pratt out in California has sent me a bunch of guys that he have D1 talent, high academic guys that still want to play competitive volleyball. So we've gotten a few guys from him and his service. So it's really no stone unturned, Scott.
I know it. I know it. I hear you, man. The recruiting aspect's so key, and it's so challenging, and it's so competitive. So, I mean, you gotta, no stone unturned is the exact way to describe it.
It doesn't stop. There's lots of stones.
Truly are. All right, man. Last question. And again, long interview, but I appreciate it so much. What's the future hold, Steve? Tell me what's going on next?
Well, professionally, Hobart was so kind to offer me not only starting their men's volleyball program, but also being an assistant athletic director. So awesome. It's been really exciting to be a part of that aspect being a part of other sports student athlete experience. So it's fantastic that I get to start and know my student athletes, but getting to know the other student athletes and seeing and sharing in their success. So I'm really excited about that opportunity to be a part of the administration here. And then starting a new program, using the resources that we have here. I've been talking with Derek Mann, our sports psychologist, and can we tweak the development of culture for this men's volleyball program, and can we make it better than what we did when I was at Fisher? He loved some of my ideas that I did there, but then he's like, why don't we do this? What have you thought of that? So using the experts that we have available to us is really exciting to me. Especially with our sports performance coaching group. We'll have 5 full-time strength and conditioning coaches.
Oh, that's so key.
On
that's
campus
huge.
In our varsity weight room and the technology that we have in that aspect. So that's another hat that I don't have to wear. So just trusting that group of coaches is going to get my team ready to play in January, which I'm fired up about, because that seems to be the one thing that ends up at least in my world, that I don't have time for, to hold the guys accountable to be in the weight room when I'm watching film, right?
Dude, that's the biggest thing. Like, I mean, I remember at Johnson & Wales, like, we had one strength guy, but he was utilized by all the teams. Very hard to get a hold of him, and not his fault. Like, you have 24 varsity teams. It's really hard to schedule everything, but getting kids in the weight room. I mean, I guess that's one thing that certainly every high schooler needs to know about. The weight room is going to be something very important to you if you want to be successful at this level, because not only does it protect you from injury, but it also allows you to play at the highest level for as long as possible. Like, that's the thing that people don't realize. It's not about looking buff, and it's not about hitting the ball harder. It's about being able to keep your level for the whole match, 30 matches a year.
Right. Yeah. January to April over the course of every weekend playing, that's a long time. Yeah. And something where in the past when I was at Elmira and Fisher, it was just hoping that we could create a culture where that was important to our student athletes. And, for the most part, the guys bought in, but having somebody else to help me with and be experts in their field. I'm the volleyball guy. I know I can talk all day about X's and O's, but I don't know what the best, way to help you jump higher or hit the ball harder. Like I think I know, but I really don't know the ins and outs of that. And it's nice to have those experts I'm surrounded by help me do that. And then I think the one thing that I'm really, really excited about, that I have the opportunity here, is that I'm going to have a full-time assistant coach and a part-time assistant coach.
Oh, that's huge.
And then my goal is to help them develop these young, passionate coaches and help them build their careers and share my knowledge with them. Is something that I really fires me up. I'm sitting down every week and talking about how and why I do things, and letting them go find their own career.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest differences between D1, D2, and D3. Not so much the level of play, because I truly believe the level of play is almost equal, with the exception of those top 15 teams in the country for D1, D2.
Yeah.
The Penn States, the UCLA's, like, those guys are a little bit different brand, but below 15, maybe even below 20, I guess, like, they were all at the highest levels, we're all playing the same level of volleyball.
Absolutely.
But the idea of having a full-time assistant coach, more help, whereas in D3, as you know, and I know, like, you have many hats on. You're running the whole thing. You're in charge of the scouting. You're in charge. And by the way, we didn't get a chance to talk too much about scouting, which is shame on me, because I think you're one of the best in the business. You absolutely changed my way of doing it. But in terms of scouting, in terms of the weightlifting, in terms of the video watching, in terms of the prep, the practices, like you do, and then the fundraising and the travel, like you do everything as a D3 coach.
Yeah.
And then to have help, oh my goodness, if you had a full time, I mean, that's I'm really stoked for you, because that's gonna be awesome to have a full time guy.
I'm gonna have to adapt too.
Yeah.
I've never had that. Like, Kelly was the head women's coach and she was my assistant, and I was the head men's coach and I was her assistant. So at least we had each other to bounce ideas off of, and we worked really well together. But now to have somebody that's dedicated to just our student athletes, and it's going to be, I have to learn how to disseminate responsibilities, and lose a little bit of control and trust that they're going to be able to do those things, and getting the right people and on that bus is going to be important. But I think that we can do it, and just having that luxury, and just like the amount of attention to detail that we're going to be able to have with our student athletes, instead of at 12:30 after lunch, instead of me meeting with the two setters, I can have my two setters meet with me, and then two outsides meet with my assistant coach, and just we can utilize our time so much better. There's more people dedicated to just the team. So I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited to learn and build it, and see how far we can take it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for you too, man. I think it's going to be great, and looking forward to see the teams that you put on the floor. Even though I'm outside the system, I'm still a fan of all of it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do.
Yeah, I appreciate
Steve,
it,
thank
Scott.
you so much, man, for your time. I thought the interview went great. I'm looking forward to putting it up, and certainly everyone, you can find it on resvsystems.com. You can also go to the social media stuff that we do. I think we put it on Facebook. We'll have a couple teasers on Instagram, and then you can find it on YouTube as well. But Steve, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it. Stay well, and looking forward to catching you down the road a little.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. I look forward to seeing you in Orlando.
We'll see how well we do in Orlando.
Still looking forward to seeing you.
Fair point. All right, bud.